hello. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Gang, we haven't even started it yet, and you guys are giving me subs and bits. Thank you so much. But let's introduce the topic. If you want to continue to like, subscribe, donate, by all means. But I'm going to get us off on the right foot by talking about what we're going to be discussing today. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be talking about a recent report released by The Intercept that detailed and alleges how the DHS, or the Department of Homeland Security, is using the threat of Hamas and other instigators on campuses in order to, what's the most neutral way to put it, be more involved with campus organizations, with the institution itself. We're going to talk about that. Like, is this a good thing? Is this government overreach, or is this a response to a very real threat? Is this something that the government should be involved in at all? Let's talk about it. I have a wonderful group of guests here to discuss it, and we'll give them some introductions and opening statements, and we'll see how it goes. And we're going to start with Cypher from Cypher Reports. Go ahead.
Hey everybody, Cypher here. I do a weekly show, no longer streaming, but you can catch me, Cypher Report, everywhere: TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, X, whatever the fuck you want to say. So that's what I do. I do weekly shows, political stuff. As far as this topic is concerned, in my opinion, I think that The Intercept is being kind of a little underhanded with how it's presenting what is happening, because of its ideological bias, as well as what it's kind of focused on right now, which is the Hamas and Israeli war. And I also think, like, just broadly speaking, other than the whole Intercept article itself, I don't think that this is necessarily a bad thing. We should be wary of whenever the government is trying to work with private institutions, especially when it comes to things around free speech. But as a base, it is not that concerning. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for being here. We'll get into it as we go. Next up, he's been on my show before, but it's been quite a bit. Aircraft Sparky, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Aircraft Sparky. I am a populist constitutionalist. I do 2 shows a week, one on Monday, one on Wednesday night, on youtube.com/Aircraft Sparky, and also Rumble. Yeah, looking at this, less government is better, always. The less intrusive the government is, the better off, more freedom that can exist. I think one of the most laughable things that comes out of this report is today's traditional undergraduate students generally are less resilient and able to handle conflict, more neurodiverse, and present more mental health challenges, such as anxiety, depression, and suicide ideation, than in any other generation. And if something like and I understand the Israel Hamas thing is controversial to some people. I mean, look, the way of the world has always been war. As long as Jews have existed, they've been persecuted. The Palestinians, they claim that they're persecuted. I mean, cool, fine, whatever. I am solely on the Israeli side of this argument. But the fact that these people can't even stand to banter with each other before they mentally break down, I think that is more of a critique on the parenting of Gen X and some of the older millennials of today. Helicopter parenting has failed. It has made our children weak and unable to handle ideas that they don't agree with. Less government good, more government bad.
Okay, thanks. I'm sure we'll get into some of that as we go. Next up, Fabian Liberty Scott. Go ahead.
So I'm an anarcho-capitalist, Fabian Liberty. You can find me on Fabian Liberty pretty much everywhere. I quit streaming for about a year, actually 11 months to be exact. And I just started coming back to it. It's kind of fun. So you can catch me Wednesdays, and then the occasional other days, follow me on YouTube. You'll find me there. Twitch censorship just got to be too difficult and too afraid to like get banned and then never be able to be on another panel ever again. So it's better to just be on YouTube. Twitch sucks. That being said, in terms of the topic, my initial reaction to the Intercept article was like, here we go again, massive government overreach. Then I read the report. Anybody that's ever worked in government has written these reports before. It's a giant nothing burger because the report isn't actually what the DHS is doing. The report is what government does, which is a bunch of people that don't exist in private entities, don't have any actual competition, don't have to worry about prices or selling things. What they have to worry about is justifying their job by writing a bunch of bullshit reports where they come up and they're like, everything is going to burn if you don't give us money. And then Congress or or whoever's in charge of them gives them like 10% of what they asked for. So I mean, that might be a surprising take to hear from an anarchist. You might think I would be like, fuck the DHS, let's get rid of the DHS. Yeah, the DHS is unjustifiable, fuck them. But nevertheless, it's kind of a nothing burger, but I do think that there's a more interesting meta conversation we will shift to, which is how government grows. Because this report is a perfect example, not of how there is like this evil cabal of like 10 Jewish bankers somewhere being like, we run the world, but really what it is it's stupidity and incompetence and like bloat and bureaucracy that creates this entanglement with corporations. So it becomes this giant kind of machine that just kind of works together and wastes more and more money and has more and more corruption and more problems as time goes on. And I think this is a perfect example of that.
Okay, we'll get into it as we go, I am sure. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. Last but certainly not least, Braden Hammer. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm Mr. Hammer on Twitch, and I would agree with what Cypher said, and I would take it even further. And this is not against Wick or anything, but the article you provided is basically a disguised opinion piece by the Intercept, and it really doesn't have any evidence for the title of the article. So they say that the DHS is sneakily infiltrating colleges to increase its own power. There's no references or articles or sources for any of that. Then it goes into actually source information about how the DHS is sending officers to college campuses to interact with campus police to enforce laws basically about anti-Semitic harassment and anti-Semitic hate crimes, to make sure that those aren't happening. And that's really the bulk of what's happening. That's really the bulk of what the DHS is doing. I thought we'd be talking about like how the DHS is brainwashing students, which is obviously isn't. It's not really involving itself in the education of students at all. It's more, again, just interacting with the police. And I think that's really, there's no way to fight against that or have any problem with that. So that's my statement.
Okay, well, thank you for being here, and I'm sure we'll get into it. So with that, the floor is open, and you guys may begin. If you have troubles getting in, please raise your hand, and we'll see what we can do.
I've got to ask,
Go ahead.
did anyone read? I'm pretty sure Fabian read the actual report that was published by the DHS. Cypher, Mr. Hammer, did y'all read the report?
Yes, the report that was requesting the DHS to make suggestions to college campuses in order to protect students and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Hammer.
Wait, I'm not sure if. Wait, was there a report attached to it?
Read this.
It was.
I read the
article.
Link. It was
there's like a link to.
Yeah, there was a hyperlink to it.
Hold on.
Okay.
Hammer,
See, I missed that one.
How can you say that the article is lying about the report that you didn't read?
Okay, listen. Wait. Okay, let me just.
He's making sure that he read
about?
it. Because when you do research about something like this, you're going to read like thousands of fucking things if you're actually read.
Right.
No, don't cope. Don't cope about it. He just showed you the title cover of it, and you didn't recognize it.
I mean,
I didn't read the report.
So, I mean, I
might have read
can
other articles calling out that article or other Twitch streamers, but don't sit here and bullshit and say that you know that something is like.
Or you can give the man a second to.
When you
didn't give him a second.
Sure. So I looked into. Yes, I looked into other articles referencing this. Okay, so I mean, I can like look at this. Does it say that? Does it? So
you looked at. I read other articles, and then you went ahead and said. And you read other articles and said, I trust their opinion more, therefore Intercept bad. I kind of agree with you that Intercept is being hyperbolic and putting in their own opinion in here, but you didn't read the fucking report. So like, you're not prepared for the discussion.
In my defense, there wasn't like a list of sources. Okay, it was
There
just
was
like
a
random
daily link
links.
to said report in the intercept.
It's highlight. There's a hyperlink in the second paragraph of the article sent to you. That's a different color. Like, come on, dude. Like, it's insulting to everybody else here that you didn't even read the report.
I think honestly you're like overplaying this just to like prove your point. I'm pretty sure because I did my
What point?
background
I'm not
research
proving.
on
I'm
this.
just, the only point I'm proving is that
I literally just I missed one link. Okay, I'm sorry. Like I did background research on this. I read into other articles and other sources on this. I've gone to the DHS website to do more research on this. Okay, yeah, I have done my background research. I missed one fucking report. Okay, bro, like.
Okay, we've established this.
Okay,
Let's,
so
let's move on. Let's keep going. Let's
really
keep going.
doesn't matter.
Let's get into the discussion. Okay.
I want to hear. Okay, so what part of the report like disproves what I'm saying?
All 28 pages.
All 28
No,
pages.
come on, that's
a little
not
bit
true.
more like
No,
specific about that.
It's just the way you talked about it. You talked about it so vaguely that it was obvious that you didn't read the report. Okay, look, the report by itself is benign. Really, all it does is it's making suggestions of how to interject federal government within these educational institutions on a permanent basis.
That's not true either, because the federal government's already there working with these places, with these institutions. It's not injecting
not in the way that they're suggesting now.
Yes, it is. The DHS has always, since the DHS was established, it was established in order to help state and local governments, private organizations, etc., be able to understand the information sphere, the terrorist threat, etc., in order to protect American citizens from various things. Now you can say that's bullshit. You can say that's bullshit. Yeah, communicate with them and like have different liaisons on the state level. You can say that it's bullshit that they shouldn't do that, but this has been a thing that the DHS has done since its inception, shortly after 9/11.
I do think that it is interesting that right off the bat in the letter to the secretary, they immediately identify how the biggest source of the problems happens to be social media and the social contagion that surrounds misinformation put forward.
Yep.
So I think that's an interesting conversation to have. The problem is the U.S. government is one of the biggest purveyors of misinformation in the freaking world. Me and Fabian went halfway across the world
before we get
to go fight wars that were literally.
Well, I was in the military too, so it doesn't matter. I think there's only one person on this.
I'm not a combat veteran.
Yeah, I didn't see.
I thought you were.
Either.
I thought you were. Fabian.
I mean, you don't need to be.
Mark is a combat veteran, but no, I just.
Oh, okay.
I gave vaccines and shit, man.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a combat veteran to have joined the military. Anyways, it doesn't matter.
No. I just wanted to make it clear that I wasn't like stolen valor up in here. Via
Sure. Right.
I just think it's weird that the government who claimed that there was all these big
let's set that as
biological weapons across the seas. They send all the people over there. Our government lies to us on the daily. You should never trust.
Set that aside for right now, for a second. Is there anything wrong with the government informing private institutions, informing other local governments and organizations of the threat assessment or any other information that the government has? Is there anything inherently wrong with that aspect?
Considering the track record of the U.S. government and their
no, that's not what I'm asking. You're injecting more of this. I'm asking as a basic function of government, set aside if the government sucks, right? As a basic function of government, is there anything wrong with the government informing people of its own assessments?
Yes, when they give misinformation, yes.
Okay. But that's a qualifier. So that would be a no.
I'm curious if Scott has the same opinion.
Well, obviously, I don't have the same opinion, right? Like he's not like he knows I'm an anarchist. Like I don't think the Department of Homeland. Here's what we should do with the Department of Homeland Security. We should find like the 3 things they're doing that are like maybe important, and have the FBI do them in like 1 or 2 months, and then deputize every single fucking DHS agent to go give them a fucking bottle of suntan lotion, a fucking hat, and put them on the southern border. Like that's what I would do.
Yeah, dig it.
Okay. But you wouldn't say that there's, you wouldn't say, okay, aside from that, do you think the government is one of its functions should inform people, whether it's private organizations, colleges, etc., other local governments, of its assessments that it's making?
I think the government should be abolished. When you say should, like, again, this is why I didn't speak up. Like WhickTV was like, I wonder what Scott thinks, but I'm an anarchist, right? Like, fuck the government, fuck the state, fuck these lying sacks of shit that steal from us, destroy our lives, and ruin fucking everything that they goddamn touch. But I'm willing to set all of that aside to have a pragmatic discussion about what is in the report and how government functions, and have a conversation that you guys want.
Sure, I'm curious.
Wait,
okay. I'm sorry. Just to like, so I'm just reading the beginning of this. Does it say anything that disagrees with anything that I've said at all?
I think you should let this
like specific, like a specific thing.
Okay, we're gonna
like a specific thing in this report.
We get it. We're gonna drop it for now, and we're gonna move on. Right? We're gonna keep going. I understand, right, that you don't like the government, Scott. I get that. I understand, but
you pulled me in. That's what I was just saying.
in the context, right, as you said, of setting that aside to discuss how the government operates today in the United States, right? To Cypher's question.
So all right, so, right. So to put on my pragmatist consequentialist cap, right? My only problem with this, right? Assuming, let's say that they actually got everything that they wanted, because I stated in my opening statement that when you read these reports, you have to recognize that this is an ask by the DHS. This is not like a policy of what the DHS is doing. This is like the DHS basically saying, you know, these are the things that we think justify us keeping our fucking budget, right? So I have to make up shit that allows me to keep my budget. I have to make up shit that allows me to keep my job. So assuming all of those things are granted, what I think this is an increase in scope. Maybe not, I wouldn't say scope, an increase in size, right? So the scope seems to be relatively similar, right? It doesn't seem like they're, in this report, they're asking for any additional responsibilities or additional power over new things. But what it does seem to do, and there is this kind of trend in government in general with these institutions, is just a kind of general growth of the bureaucracy. And the more there are layers, right? Kind of like from a Weber's perspective, right? You know, what is it? Is it the Peter principle, right? Like people rise to the level of their own incompetence. Like it's just this increasing, it's the increasing layers of like middle management and all these things. Like under the Donald Trump administration, for example, like the CISA came out, and then CISA like was all involved in social media. It's like, is that really an additional new task? I mean, it kind of is and it kind of isn't, but like things that used to be small, they keep wanting to expand, and then it becomes this kind of incestuous relationship where DHS and all of these federal agents are like connected with like all of these different organizations to be tasked with what? And the question, the justification here is there's this potential threat of violence or like protest or things because of what's happening in the Middle East. And all of the fucking data shows over and over again throughout like the last 30 years that every form of crime, hate crime, rapes, sexual assaults, murders, robberies, are some of the lowest in the world on university campuses. It's fucking social media bullshit trying to pretend like there's this grave danger because every now and then someone's like, I saw a swastika, and every news agency has to fucking talk about it. And it's stupid. Like there's just no justification for it.
Well, point of clarity, where in this they are asking for more people? Because I didn't read that. It sounded like they asked.
So there is.
For point of clarity, further clarity, I did see in here when I was reading it that there was the request for somebody to be assigned, but that's not
want to
necessarily
open offices on the campuses and things like that. Is really
so there's that.
I'm sorry, I was still talking. I didn't hear you.
So there was some open offices, I believe, but recommendation number, where is it? Number. Build trusting environment that encourages, you know, I don't know what that means, but that almost certainly means additional representatives, additional monies, right? So recommendation number 3 almost certainly means we need more resources, so there's more reporting, so there's more connection between students and resource, right? So that's kind of that almost entails a growth. And then there is
the interaction between the
recommendation number 5. I don't know, because it depends on how recommendation number 5 is used. Because earmark congressional funds could just be like one dude, right? How those funds are disseminated or how those funds are done like that could be a growth, or it could like not be much of a growth, right? It just kind of depends on how the actual structure would be done.
When you say
But
number
yeah, there's a
5, you
couple
just
of
mean
examples.
down the list of points, right? So the bullet point 5. Just making sure I'm going to read the right.
Well, it
one.
says recommendation number 5 and in on a page 19 of the
Oh,
PDF
I see.
online
I see it. It's
of
at
the
top.
Homeland Security of
Yeah, and they also talk about developing toolkits for different organizations and stuff like that, which is going to make them want to increase for personnel and just little things.
Yeah,
like
there's nothing in there that says like hire 10,000 people, right?
Sure,
But it's
sure.
all
No,
of
no,
these
no.
things that would
I gotcha.
require funds, people, etc.
No, that's fair. I was just making sure that I wasn't misunderstanding you. So we're good.
no.
Okay.
But it
You
Go
had
ahead.
something to say, Sparky? If not,
Well, it's just one thing that I find interesting in this is they keep on talking about they want to talk about freedom of speech, which is a great thing. I'm all for it. Talk about academic freedom, that's a great thing. But then they want to interject DEI, which is counterintuitive to both academic freedom and freedom
mean,
of speech.
It's just acknowledging that DEI offices exist in order to meet these students' needs here, and at most times not at most times, but a lot of instances of it not meeting those students' needs, either because the DEI representative in question just doesn't know enough because there's a bunch of different kind of social groups that exist, or just not necessarily resourced properly to meet every student's needs.
I mean,
that have
they're kind of
initiatives.
asking for additional training, right? So they're asking for
Yeah.
more money for DEI initiatives and programs, right? So
But
on
DEI
page
is
20, working from the White House recommendation to quote incorporate information about anti-Semitism into federal diversity, equity, inclusion,
gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
accessibility training programs. So like they're demanding money for Marxist programs to indoctrinate their own federal
DEI is
agents,
not
right.
not necessarily Marxist. You
I mean, is it
you
not
be a
based in
basic
critical
bitch.
race theory?
You can be a basic bitch liberal, not believe in anything of the Marxist ideology whatsoever, and still be like, hey, I think it's okay. I think it's pretty good to have somebody that's representative of a group be able to explain what this means.
No.
in their
I don't.
context.
You don't get to decouple DEI, which is
Sure
the
you do, but
praxis
this
of
isn't the
critical race
debate.
theory, by saying that like liberals, like, well, I mean, Spark brought it up, so I'm just saying it's not just like, oh, acknowledge. You said your first point was it's just acknowledging these programs exist, and then I say, hey, on page 20, they're asking for more training and more money, so that directly refutes what you said.
Sure,
And then you're like,
I'm not
oh, well, that's not really a big deal. I'm like, well, it kind
That's
of
not what I
is if
said.
you're
I
against
said
that shit.
I said that it's not necessarily Marxist. Please listen to what I actually said. So these concepts.
Well,
are
yeah,
not
no,
necessarily
that is
Marxist,
just.
But this isn't
that's what you said.
the debate. So,
yeah, I do want to kind
No,
of.
you said it wasn't that big of a deal, and then you said it was.
I do want to kind of refocus the conversation, if I may. So the basic concept here of the government being involved with colleges and being working with colleges to do all sorts of things, whether it be something as simple as passing on information from threat levels, threat assessments, etc., to as at least the article, and maybe not the report itself, but the article alluded to, changing curriculum or at least affecting curriculum. Do we think that this is something the government should have a place in, right? Just as a concept, right? Should the government come into a college campus and be involved, and to what extent should they be involved? Go ahead.
no.
I think
I think it's antithetical to an academic program to have to succumb to propaganda, and a lot of things that government does is develop propaganda. I just don't buy into it. Anytime the government gets involved, they start taking names, they start making lists of things, and they even mention things such as activists and stuff on campus, keeping eyes on them. Okay, when I went to the University of Oklahoma, we had some large activists there who did a lot of stuff for the indigenous, and they were good people. They were loud, they were noisy, and their protests were messy. But if you're keeping track of these activists, it's kind of like the whole idea with gun registries and stuff. The last thing you want is the government to have more information on you, to be tracking you and things like that, unless you're doing something subversive, something actually illegal. And by the way, having
how is the
bad
government
opinions, having
how
bad
is the
opinions of
government
other
supposed to
people
know the
is not
difference?
illegal.
How is the government supposed to know the difference between an activist and somebody that's planning a terrorist attack?
You wait till they do something. That's why we have a
Wait,
reactive
You
police
wait until
force.
they do something.
you wait. You
Yeah.
wait. You don't
Okay.
think there should be any form of preventative, like law enforcement?
Every
Like
time there's been a
investigations?
mass shooter, the FBI has always come out and said, say the line, we had them on our radar and they did nothing. It's because we have a reactive police force, not a proactive.
The
Wait,
reason why
do you
they
have
didn't
a- do
do
you have a-
anything is because of the fact that we have
do.
civil rights still.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I do want to pass the ball to Hammer for a minute. He was trying to get in here, and I want to give
Sure,
him a
sorry.
little space. Go ahead.
True.
Hammer.
I think first of all, you say that like, well, every mass shooting, they didn't catch him, they didn't preemptively stop him, but of course there's going to be people who slip. But like, do you have the statistics on how many terrorist attacks have been prevented? The answer isn't zero, number one. And number two, I'll just give my take on, should government be involved on college campuses? Yes, I think that to a limited extent, any interest group should have an opportunity to talk to students. The government has its own interests, it has its own perspective. It should have the opportunity to like reach students. If it's enforcing curriculum, telling them what they can and can't say, like holistically, obviously that's wrong. But like
Do you
having
believe the government has rights?
yeah, absolutely.
No, the government has no rights. Only the people have rights.
What? So you
Like-
think the government is just like another interest group that has the monopoly on power and violence, but an interest group that has a right for its voice to be heard on college campuses?
Yeah, the government has a right to have its voice heard. I
Okay,
don't think
all
that's
right, all right.
insane. Like if
It's
like
insane.
I mean, that does sound crazy if you're like anti-government, but like let's say the FBI,
Like
there's
half
a
the
murder.
country at this point.
Say there's a murder, right? And the FBI wants to investigate. Do they have the right to investigate?
It's a federal crime. Yes, they have the right to.
Okay, so
investigate
the
crime.
government in certain cases does have rights, right?
They don't. No.
That's
They-
not a
they-
right of the government. That's
that-
a theft that has been
that's their
stolen
task.
from you.
Yes.
They stole from me the right to investigate murders. They stole from me the right to defend myself. They
Yes,
stole
Okay,
And
from
there's
well,
a
I mean,
reason
that
why-
would be the
can we
case
not
if we
get on
lived
this
in an
libertarian
anarchist
argument
society,
for the love
but
of
we
God?
don't. So we live in a government, we live in a democracy, and in that democracy we have a government, and the government,
Yeah, I get it.
we
We live in a
allow it,
society.
the population,
Awesome. You did the meme.
we live in a population that allows this government to do what it has to do because we like our government, because we live in a democracy. And we vote in our democracy.
Listen, you're full
Most
of
people
shit.
aren't
You're full of shit.
anarchists.
We live, listen, you don't have to be an anarchist, right? You just have to be like anyone in the last 100 years and then up until like 20 years ago, and then only the Republicans and anarchists and libertarians and non-crazy left liberals today to know that like the government is something that is dangerous if it gets too powerful, and in every way, shape, or form, we should limit its scope and power, except for those things that are totally and very deeply necessary, right? Like as an anarchist, yeah, I say fuck the government completely, but almost anyone throughout history, American history, except for magically the big, massive government fucking neocon Democrats today, think that the government has like some right for its voice to be heard on college camps. No, it doesn't. The only thing
It
the
hasn't-
government has a right to do, even under our constitutional republic, is be voted on and be fired or replaced if they're not good enough. Like that's its goal.
My point.
reason-
Okay, sorry. I'll let you talk, Cypher.
No, that's fine. Go for it.
Okay, the reason that I say that the government has a right as like an interest group, I think that colleges are probably best when different groups of people speak to them. Like, I think college is the perfect place for different people, like even corporations or even like activist groups, like to come and talk to them so that you can actually hear from like different groups of people what they have to say. And I think that government is one of those people. Would you like lose your fucking mind if a mailman went to a college and talked about how important the postal service is?
But that isn't what is
No.
even discussed, even remotely. In
Okay,
We're talking
no,
about
because the
rights
postal
and
service,
authority.
a postal worker is an employee of the government, and he's
You think
advocating
this
on
is a
behalf
dumb-
of the
you're being
government.
silly. You're being
That's
silly.
I'm not being silly. I'm being
You're
100%
saying
serious.
that the government, you've changed the goalpost from the government has a right to have its voice heard, and you did this as a Mott and Bailey situation where the entire conversation is not about whether or not the government has the right to walk onto the quad and preach to students about how the Department of Homeland Security needs good funding, so you should vote for this Democrat. But instead, we're talking about whether or not they have the authority to have certain agents, whether or not they have the authority or the right, as you put it, to implant with our tax dollars individuals that are facilitating communication, that are tracking people, that are tracking protest
I
groups,
never-
that are taking their metadata
That's
so that
a-
they can make sure that
I
these
never
protesters.
said
like, this is a
anything
totally
about
different
tracking.
thing.
If
I
I
never
may, if
said
I may
anything
I
about
know, but
tracking.
this is the
I never
modern
justified
bailiff.
tracking. Okay, no.
Right, that's why it's
because
fallacious.
you
okay,
the difference is-
okay.
All right.
I'm going to interject because we're hitting all around the point, but I want to address something that Fabian just brought up, like the idea, right, of the government or a governmental agency keeping tabs on protesters on campus, right?
Okay.
Is this something that is a needful thing? Again, we have people who are very concerned about some of the rhetoric that are given, especially by the pro-Palestine side on things. Just this week in the Atlantic, they talked about one of the activists talking about how the president being executed would be something they were for, right? Like for war crimes and things like that. Does the government not have
Based.
does the government not have an interest in keeping tabs and at least looking into those people to think, well, hey, is this person just spouting off or is this a credible threat? Like, this is a question, right? And this is where I think that the crux of the issue is to protect its citizens. Does the government have the right or the ability, or should it have the ability, to use a better phrase, to look into threats? And are these protesters potential threats? That's the question. Go ahead.
To answer the actual question that's being proposed, the entire reason government exists is because we as a society, fucking way long ago, decided that it was better to have an institution that had the monopoly of violence to prevent blood feuds and all other manner of stuff in order to create a more orderly society and organize people. One of the obligations that government has from this is the duty to protect citizens, protect people from violence, because it has the monopoly of violence. And when it runs afoul of that duty, when it uses its power incorrectly, then it loses its moral authority to do anything. But at the same time, when a government fails to protect its citizens from known threats or people from known threats, it also loses its moral whatever I said before previously, its moral justification
authority.
for its existence. Moral authority.
Does government actually have a moral authority? I
Philosophically,
reject that notion altogether.
yes, that's the whole idea. And whether you want to say this government has any moral authority or not is a separate question from government having moral authority at all from a philosophical standpoint. So we can abstract it from the United States or Canada or China or any other government that might exist.
I'd say
to
any
abstract
government. I don't think any government has moral authority. Because as a citizen of America, the government is supposed to be by and for the people.
Yes,
okay?
that's what gives it its moral authority to use.
No, the people are the moral authority, not the government.
I think we're just talking past each other, but that's fine.
Sure. Okay. Do you think that like the government should we should have the government like do law enforcement, right?
No.
Whatever the second half of that question is, no.
The state and local is the only law enforcement that should exist.
Yeah, you want to.
That's a part of the government. Well, that's a part of the government, right?
But that's still government.
It's actually
still government.
It's less of a government.
We're not. I'm not talking about federal. I'm talking about government in general as an idea, not federal.
Okay, yes.
Could be a monarchy.
Why are we having this meta conversation? Because
it's important to understand. It's important to do this in order to understand where our disagreements actually lie. So if the government, as it exists in general as a idea, has moral obligations in order to protect people from violence, then we can talk about, okay, how do we properly go about doing that? And that's where this debate actually can flourish, is on that. But if we don't agree that the government has a moral obligation, moral authority to protect its citizens from danger, then we're not going to agree on anything, and there's no point to continue.
So how do you define from danger? Because the idea
you must agree with me or else we can't speak.
Yeah.
Well, if the government can't do anything, then if your answer
the question this way, and you must agree with me. If you don't agree with me, then we can't.
That's not what I did. Come on.
No. I mean, the question is does the government have moral authority to investigate and prevent crimes? And your answer is, well, the government can't do anything, right? And then it's okay, well.
Okay, I've really tried to ask this 20 different ways, and you guys just keep going on to this meta I don't understand, right?
I'm the for whatever fucking reason, the ANCAP here is the only one not doing a meta conversation about whether or not government should exist.
Okay,
what the fuck is wrong with you?
So wait, what is your argument for against like specifically about government like investigating protesters?
So the
Like,
problem
I have
is,
no problem. I have no problem doing an internal critique for the means of having a conversation. I have no problem adopting your philosophical worldview of consequentialism, utilitarianism, and or a constitutional republic to make a constitutional argument or a utilitarian argument against these things, so that we can have this conversation. But if you just want to talk about the philosophical roots of whether or not government ought exist, I'll fucking sit here and preach ANCAP philosophy all day and bury you guys.
I'm not talking
Wait,
about
no, wait. I'm trying to ask the direct question that Wick is asking.
I don't know if you are. Look again. Let me try one more time. They're alleging that the allegation is that the DHS is trying to expand its reach and its influence so that it can potentially track and investigate potential threats within college campuses. My question is, do we want the DHS to be involved in doing that? Why or why not? And that is the question. And we don't have to get, should government exist about this? We don't. Please. Oh my God. I don't want. I don't.
I'll answer very directly. No. Because every time the government puts people on a list, they harass these individuals. They do all kinds of bad things to them. People get put on no-fly lists for saying the wrong thing with no credible anything behind it. It is ridiculous. We have a reactionary police force. They should act as a reactionary police force. We should not have the minority report going on.
So then the government
wait,
has no obligation
does
to
Fabian have the same answer?
Protect its people.
Fabian was
before you ask Fabian whether he has the same answer, I want to hear what Cypher just said. I couldn't because you guys were talking at the same time. Repeat what you just said, please, Cypher. Go ahead.
Yeah. So if the so what Aircraft Sparky was saying is that he believes that the government, anytime the government puts anybody on a list, they harass people, and therefore the government is bad when it does these things, right? Because it's a and then on top of that, the government should only have a reactive police force, which means that it can only go and find out when somebody committed a crime and then try to hold them account for it. If that is the question, then the government, the DHS, does not have any responsibility to prevent a terrorist attack from happening. So it becomes, that's where the rub is. So for me, the government has a moral obligation in order to protect its citizens. As such, the government has the ability, should have the ability to investigate any various claims, whether it's this person is a terrorist, whether this person is engaged in malinformation, malign information, whether it's propaganda, etc. And the government needs to be able to do these things in order to suss out credible threats from non-credible threats. That's the right word.
There you go. Response.
Yeah, so I would say a few things. So first and foremost, I would say it's important to recognize that this moral obligation, this moral duty that the state has to enforce protection, right? To be preemptive in some regard, right? To prevent or preventative, right? A deterrent, whatever, however you want to put it. I don't really know where, like, we could talk about like where you believe that comes from, and that's fine, and I'm okay with you accepting that you do indeed believe that. But from a legal perspective, that has been shot down in the Supreme Court multiple times, right? Police officers, state agencies, etc., do not have any duty or obligation to stop crime or to stop anything. Plenty of people have been charged, right, or have been sued because they didn't intervene, and over again. Courts have found that a cop is allowed to be like, nope, sure. I'm scared, so I let that woman get beat to death.
So right? The rub for that is that the Supreme Court is looking at individual cases and not whether or not the government has an obligation itself, right? So if you do not have you as an individual do not have the obligation to prevent the harm of another person. So they took that to the individual police officer saying, hey, you don't have a duty to go rescue that person or get get in the line of fire. You don't have
the pattern
duty.
is the opposite. The pattern is in the opposite direction, right? Because there is known specific imminent danger at an individual level, and at larger governmental organizations, what you were talking about is potential threats that you could never stop.
No,
like all of, right?
Yeah. So, but the issue is that the Supreme Court is saying, as an individual officer, you don't have to risk your own life to try to save someone else's life, because they're putting the individual
I'm
on
aware.
a pedestal. So I'm saying, so it's not that the government.
I'm saying the pattern is in the opposite direction.
But that doesn't make the government itself lose that responsibility. Anytime we have.
Okay, well, hear me out. So what you're saying makes no sense if you actually like break it down, right? Because when you say the government has a responsibility to stop terrorist attacks, right?
Sure.
Right? They don't. They have, at least in your, like, even by your own logic, that's obviously not true. Like, what you mean to say is that the government has some responsibility to use some portion of our tax-paying dollars to be as effective as possible in trying to stop some level of terrorist attacks. And that is to be determined based off of our votes, what percentage of money we're allowed to have taken away to what percentage of crime we want reduced, right?
That's fine. I don't want to argue over that thing. I don't want to argue over.
It's a weird way to say it, but it's a correct way to say it.
Right? No, I got you.
Sure, but like, I don't think you're necessarily disagreeing with him. So yeah, they're like, we would, I guess you could even say, like, we would expect the government to do this. Like, why? Like, we would want them to, right, as voters. So even if they're like not absolutely forced to, technically, then like we like be in, like, generally the population would be in favor of them investigating terrorist attacks now.
Right. But hold on, let me explain, because you both seem confused by this. The reason that it's important for me to point this out, instead of just saying it's their job to stop it, but that there is a negotiation between the quote unquote, the concept of the will of the people, the moral authority that you're referencing, right? It's kind of this Rousseauian kind of like social contract theory, right? That there is a kind of like that people are supportive of the state using their money that they make at their job to protect them from terrorist attacks. And so there's a negotiation about the efficiency of that. And so when you have a bloated government organization that's wasting money on college kids that they have no actual evidence that they're a legitimate threat, right? That's when the negotiation comes in to, are you wasting my money, and are you becoming a tyrannical organization that's looking into everything as opposed to doing your fucking job?
Sure. And when it comes to the particular protests that are happening on college campuses right now, there have been credible threats of violence against both sides, against Muslims and Jews at different things.
Sure.
And so there's
like fucking 2 murders a day in Chicago, right? Credible threats of violence, I don't think is a great fucking metric to fucking measure how often, how much federal agencies should be involved in fucking policing and spying on college kids. Like,
yeah, but I mean, but
silly.
like, if we're going by like support of the like voters, then I'm guessing that the people in Chicago who are getting murdered probably aren't in support of the government coming in to help them and investigate, like,
most of them
are murdering them.
Almost all of them are, including the black population, are super pro police in those areas where they keep dying.
You didn't let him finish.
Police come in and fix this.
Not generally, not the people who are dying, but like in terms of the colleges, I mean, the students in college,
they're looking for EMS because they're dying.
Oh god.
Okay.
$2.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay. To say big Hammer W, bigger Fabio L. Thank you for the $2.
Thank you.
Just on a basic level, and this is to Sparky and Fabian first, and then I'm curious. Do you think that, right? And set aside the anarchism for just a moment, right? The government, as it exists,
I have been this whole time.
I know, as it exists now, should the government be looking into credible terrorist threats? Like, say they get a notice that there's a group of individuals that are being funded by Qatar that may have some have said some nefarious things about different, like the Holocaust Museum or something. Do you think that the government should at least investigate that? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Well,
obviously.
yeah, investigating Al Jazeera is always a good thing.
Okay, so that being said, right? Again, the allegation is that there are foreign governments pouring money into groups that are active on campuses that, again, have rhetoric and engage in activities that might pose a harm to different institutions, groups, and other things like that. So if you were against the DHS, right, but if you're for the investigation, why are you against the DHS being involved in the campus? Like there seems to be
so it's very simple. It's very simple, right? So when do I have the right to defend myself? Do I have and it's an important question, right? Like, so in an altercation between two individuals, right? I have a right to defend myself when they punch me, right? When they start fighting me, when they start acting, right? But there's another point where I have a right to defend myself too, right? Which is, let's say person A and person B, right? I'm person A. Person B has a gun. They pull the gun out of the holster. They brandish the firearm, they point it at me, and they put their finger in the trigger well. They have communicated to me the intent to commit violence. Right. And so I can defend myself from that imminent threat, that imminent harm, because there's a communication of that harm. And so it is in these positions where the government ought, until such a time that, we can regain our rights back, the government ought find information that is a communication of an intent to commit harm. So assuming the Governor Whitmer plot, for example, wasn't completely created by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the FBI didn't try and use all their funds to kidnap a governor, right? Assuming that they didn't do that, when someone buys the van and they buy the bomb materials, right, and then they come up with a plan. Well, it's like, okay, well, the buying of the bomb materials, the buying of the van, the buying of the fertilizer, all of these things are a communication for the specific act that they're talking about. And so it's no different than pointing a gun at me. But when you say, oh, you got funding from a group that is bad to protest against a war, I think what I'm far more likely to assume in that situation is that the government has been doing what it's been doing since the hippie movement, which is utilizing federal power to try and stymie, slow down, and otherwise, censure the speech of those that go against the military prison and industrial complex.
And look, we've even seen recently here domestically how even our own court system has been used against political candidates that did not agree with the establishment thoughts. So think what you will, but our government is corrupt, and why should we give them more power to spread their corruption, to push their propaganda and everything else?
People are corrupt. Why
Yes.
give them people more?
Okay, so your issue is that they're like going after people who aren't like literally buying like firearms or buying weapons and stuff, right? So you think that's
Yes.
an overreach?
Yes.
I was asked the scope, and I gave the scope, which is when I think it is important for the state to track communications, not private communications, but communications that come from outside of the U.S. into the U.S., right? Things that they can publicly gain, right? And when they find things that communicate a threat, then they can investigate that threat. I don't think what they ought to be doing, I don't think they ought to be wiretapping people or fucking doing without, right? Like, I think we obviously don't want, I think most of us don't want the state doing that. I think most of us don't want us tracking for our own safety every communication that we have. But I mean, maybe not, because Edward Snowden kind of proved that the government was already doing that and nobody went to jail. So we kind of have to assume that they're still doing that.
Snowden was a hero.
Wait, so just a
Prison
point of
charge.
clarification. So if someone like, let's say someone like says, "Oh, I'm pro Hamas all the way, 100% pro Hamas. I think they're doing a great thing," and the DHS, this is just clarification, and the DHS decided to like investigate their house or like look into their,
That'd be wrong.
look into them. Would that be
Where's
wrong?
the line?
Be fucked up.
Where's
They
the
fucked
line?
up?
So if
When you say I'm pro Hamas, right? You're not. I already gave the line. The communication towards the desire, intent, or the plan to commit violence.
So you're
That's the
okay
line.
with a person. So are you okay then with the example that Wick gave earlier, or I think it was Wick gave earlier, that a person on campus was like, I would love to see Biden get the rope.
I think that's incredibly important that we preserve people's right to do that. And I think those very sentiments, those very speeches are why this country exists in the first
So
place.
there's no,
because we
so
want
there's
to
no,
tar
there's
and
no
feather
reason.
politicians.
Sure. There's no, well, wishing death on somebody is a bit different than being like, hey, they should go away. But there's no reason
One's an
to
act,
investigate
one's just
further.
a wish,
There's no reason to investigate further.
I think if you want to use your resources to investigate someone's publicly available information because you find that's efficacious, go ahead and do it. But there's no reason to get a wiretap for them. There's no reason to get like a warrant for them.
I think we can have some agreement there.
I mean, like, I don't think if I see that, right, I don't have a huge, it's not my big fight that like some DHS officials like, let's check out the rest of their Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, fucking, like,
Sure.
I don't think that's a big fucking ass.
So then if you I'm not saying this person did it because I don't know anything about this. Just know what Wick told me.
Right. This is a hypothetical person at this point.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. So we go down the rabbit hole, and then it turns out, hey, they've been like retweeting, Hamas and like Dept to Jews, and there was a person that they celebrated that like shot up a synagogue, and then they're like, oh, I wish I could do that. Does that cross the line?
I don't think so.
No,
Honestly.
it doesn't. I mean, that's why so many mass shooters are on. It's kind of what Sparky said earlier. There's a lot of mass shooters that are like on the FBI's radar.
Because until there's some action, they can't really. The FBI can't.
Right. We don't want it. Because the problem with that hypothetical, right, is that hypothetical is basically what you're really asking is, ought the government have the right to wiretap and do warrantless searches and completely violate the Fourth Amendment?
No.
Well, hold on. Well, you get a warrant based off of no justification, whatever.
I mean,
it would be a violation of the Fourth
That's the argument, isn't it?
No, but the argument, listen to me. The argument is that you believe without any calls, without any suspicion of a crime being committed, right? And I'm not saying you believe this, just the hypothetical sets this up, is ought we, with no suspicion of a crime being committed, and with no indication that they're claiming or that they're saying that they're going to commit a crime, ought we be able to suspend their Fourth Amendment rights? And the problem with that is you can set up a scenario where it sounds intuitively really good, right? Like this person sounds cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and everyone's kind of like, yeah, maybe we should check out if their fucking apartment is crazy, right? But then the other thing is that when that gets turned on its head, when the state is given that power, all of a sudden the state doesn't use it for your crazy hypothetical. They use it on, I don't know, Malcolm X.
$5.
I mean, Malcolm X was part of a terrorist group. Sorry.
No, it's okay. $5 from Crazy Chicken 132. 21-foot rule is good enough for the cops to deal with aggressors. Deal and aggressors are in quotation marks. On a first strike basis, not good enough for citizens. Thank you for the $5. Did you? I cut you off, Hammer, so I'll let you go first. Then I have another question.
Sure. So wait. So I think my main disagreement is the idea that, like, again, like, being a part of like an extremist group doesn't like provide reasonable evidence that you can that you're going to commit a crime. I think it does. I think that, like, if you're saying I love Hamas, I love when they like murder.
Can you define just real quick for me, just so I'm clear? Do you know what's an extremist group in your mind?
Extremist group, like so I would say that
because the government, for the record, currently says I'm in an extremist group, right? Like the current terrorist threat things say that by being an ANCAP, I'm in an. They specifically mention sovereign citizens, ANCAPs, libertarians as examples of far right extremist groups, despite the fact that I am nothing in common with the far right. So again, definitions here matter. It's really important. This is why it's scary.
Sure.
You're willing to suspend the Fourth Amendment.
I would say a literal like admission. I would say a literal admission, like you've been accepted into a terrorist group, or like a strong desire to be like aligned with them if they're a different part of the group, like Hamas. And I would say a terrorist group is anyone who's like who's committed acts of violence for political aims and is not a government.
Okay,
but I think there's a big difference between like a college kid that's 19 years old, right? That, has nothing but a bunch of woke professors and loves to tweet out hashtag Free Palestine, right? Saying she supports Hamas, right? And then like a 26-year-old with no documents that just came across the southern border that is actually like a card-carrying member of Hamas, right? Like just because he hasn't communicated he's going to kill people, but he has communicated he's actually in the fucking group, right? And is like been trained by them. These are wildly different things, right? So like giving support.
Would you be okay with wiretapping that
person? But
but the gentleman in your scenario, the 26 and the 26.
Yeah, because I think that's a communication, right? Like if
Okay.
you're in a group
So
and they
certain
have like a
extremist
platform
groups.
that says, well, no,
Right.
if the platform specifically says that their desire is to, like, if your platform says, oh, I don't know, like one day the rocks will call out and say there is a Jew hiding behind me. Oh, Muslim, please come and kill the Jew. Like if you have like that fucking that much violence in your platform, you say that you're going to kill the Jews and you're in the kill the Jews group, like fucking, then
Okay.
like maybe we should look into you when
Fair
you're
enough.
in
I
that group.
think
So-
that Fabi and I are actually kind of in agreement here. I just hope that
There is-
I think
remains consistent.
There is
Yeah.
so what I'm hearing at least is there is a line where you would be like, okay, yeah, we do need to monitor that guy.
It's
It's just a very,
communication.
very
Exactly.
extreme line.
That's my principle. My principle is you're communicating, just like the gun is communicating. When you say I support this people because they're freedom fighters and this is what decolonization looks like, you're a woke fucking retard. You're not a member of Hamas, right? But if you're like an active person in a sleeper cell, but you actually haven't committed any crimes, you being a part of that group and working towards that group's aims here in the United States is, as far as I'm concerned, communication of your desire and your intent to commit some form of terrorist attack in the near future.
But given that we
And
don't
there's-
have a list, at least that I'm aware of all
Yeah.
the members of all the terrorist groups that ever existed, there might be some tells or signifiers within people that say, hey, this person, like, I don't know if you guys remember the was it the Afghanistan war or the Iraq war, where there was an American citizen who went over to
There's been so many.
right there.
Yeah,
There's an American
a lot.
citizen who went over
Joined
and
ISIS and
fought.
everything.
Yeah, and fought with
Yeah.
ISIS.
But
and all
that's one
that.
of those communications that Fabian is
Right.
basically calling out to. We're talking about actual
Sure.
action. The difference between an ideologue screeching something at the top of their fucking lungs into the void is a lot different than them committing themselves to actually doing something.
Right. But you
That's
in
what the
order
line
Not
is.
to
fascist. Like
In-
fascist states
right.
start killing people because
Sure.
they support groups and they say they're parts
But
of things and they
there-
only spite ideology.
there is at some point a line where that investigation starts.
Yes.
And that
but
the
investigation
communication for
yes,
the,
so,
for the
but I'm
expressed
sure
desire.
we disagree on what that communication is to start the investigation.
Can I ask you,
but you
Cypher?
already-
Can I ask you, Cypher? Not to cut you off, but I'm asking you the question, so you can just continue if you need. Where's the line for you? At what point? Because you've been in agreement a little bit with Fabian and Aircraft Sparky there about like we shouldn't be just wiretapping protesters.
Yeah.
And fair enough, yeah, true. But like, at what point in your mind do you think, okay, this is a little what to use
I think-
Fabian's language here? When has the person or individual communicated enough that
Yeah,
okay, this might be an actual threat and we need to look into it?
sure. So I think when the government starts to look into things when it's public, I think Fabian Liberty and I agree on this, is that if it's public, it's fine. It doesn't fucking matter, right?
Yeah,
the
I don't
government
give
has
a
a
fuck.
right to
If you're dumb enough to post
create
it on Twitter,
create a list from that, right? If during that investigation into their public stuff, there are repeated calls for violence, repeated things.
When you
of
say
like,
calls
hey,
for violence, what do you mean?
Somebody should, I wish somebody would go kill somebody right now, or oh, I can't wait until we rise up and all the X group is dead. Long live the day
Real
of
quick,
the rope
real
kind
quick.
of stuff.
real quick, are you in favor of the state wiretapping and investigating basically every Marxist, Leninist, and communist
I'm not a
in
Marxist
Twitter?
Leninist,
All
so
like
yes. No, I'm just kidding.
no.
No,
Well, I'm just curious. I'm just curious.
Yes, I
because
mean,
what
if
you
they're being
communicated
violent, then yeah.
would apply to basically all of them, right?
yeah, I'm fine. In my
You're fine with the
estimation,
DHS hiring like a couple 100,000 people to go through all of these people's lives and personal
it's
communications.
not. There's
and-
going to be a give and take on this. But when there's enough repeated calls for violence, and then there's like some other thing, like oh, it seems like they're hanging out with this group of people over here, and we know that group of people is kind of sussy.
So
Then
Hamas
we can
hobby,
do
he
that.
Yeah,
should be on
it should
terror
probably
watch
it
list?
should it should probably
What?
it should probably match like trends of
Hold
actual
on,
like violence and hate crimes.
Okay, I want to hear what's fair enough, but I want to hear what Sparky just said because I couldn't.
Should
Yeah, what'd you
Hassan
say?
Abi be on a terror watch list then? Because he has shown public support for terrorist organizations. He has actually interviewed terrorists on his own stream and everything else.
Are you-
So by
you talking
your
about that Houthi
standards,
guy?
he should be on a no-fly list right now.
I don't
is that
think
what you're saying?
I think the no-fly list is kind of shit. But I think that if the government determined that the threshold, and for my threshold, if the government said
So
that,
this
hey,
is
that
your.
meets my
To be
threshold,
clear, I
my
don't care what the
threshold,
government, what you like.
I know,
what you think the
I know.
government
I'm
does.
saying,
I'm asking you.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
I just want to make sure.
I'm saying I don't know all of the information. So, like I
Can I
said,
just be real quick, just interject about the Hassan situation, right? Obviously not. And the reason I say obviously not isn't because, I'm a champion of his right to not be investigated. I'm assuming the government already did the investigation, and what they found was that his dad works with the US government as a billionaire in Turkey, and that his brother works for Boeing and is one of those people that funds the military industrial complex that bombs all the brown people over there anyways. And he's nothing but a fucking hypocrite who has a bunch of billionaire and millionaire family members that all are the people that are actually making the moves to bomb those people in those countries anyways. And then they were like, oh, he's good and fine. He's just pretending to be a socialist on the internet.
I think that if it came out that Hassan was hanging around an actual group of people that have known terrorist ties and not doing the interview that he did, the interview thing would fall under free speech.
Not that time thing. That time he hung out literally and fawned over him and said he looked like a hot pirate from One Piece.
Yeah, and he also in that interview he also said, "Oh, it looks like you got media training." So Hassan might play an idiot. He's not an idiot. He might play one, but he's not really one. But the thing is that would fall under free speech.
I think, but it's fine.
Whatever. It would fall under the whole free speech right to do journalism and interview people and that sort of thing. It would have to be more than one. So that was the only one that we know about. He wasn't physically in the location with the person. I don't think that rises to my threshold of
He's
what
raised
this
money
is.
for.
Here's the issue.
He's run
hold on.
which terrorist organization?
UNWRA.
UNR is not a terrorist organization. The
Okay,
UN has
so
not
real
found
quick,
that.
right.
Israel lied about a lot of stuff. We don't need to get into the first debate.
Hold on. No, so real quick, right? There's a problem with this. Where do we draw the line thing? Right. Setting aside my tendencies to believe that like the state will grow always, right? Because I think we've kind of seen that. Right. Setting that aside, right? The reason that the state has grown less in the United States versus many other liberal democracies in terms of private individual rights and private industries' rights is because we have a fairly strong constitution. I would say not nearly strong enough, in my opinion, but at the end of the day, it's just a piece of paper, right? But that piece of paper does enough people believe in it that it is kind of like it's real enough, and the courts seem to follow it okay. And so when you argue that like we ought to water down the Fourth Amendment, right? That there's these like you have to give a really very, very clear line when you say the government is now allowed to invade people's private communications, go into their homes, right? Like you have to give a very, very clear line, because anytime you don't give a clear line over and over again, what you're going to find is that the government will abuse that authority that you give it.
Sure. I'm not going to disagree that the government will abuse its authority if given the latitude to abuse its authority. Right now, we have some of that, but we don't have that as often, like you just said, as some other governments do. And that's because we have a court system that helps keep things in check. So the court system would still be like, look at all the facts and evidence in question. Sure. I mean, the FISA courts aside to a degree, because we can probably agree that FISA is almost just a rubber stamp.
It's a rubber stamp approval.
There's reasons that happens. The government doesn't bring in cases that it necessarily thinks it can't get a warrant in. There's other things
but that's
like
what we're talking about here. It's important to know that that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about like police officers and whether or not they have egress rights to your porch, or police officers and whether or not they can use a drug dog to go around your house. We're talking about federal agencies and their capacity to say that we have a right to track protest groups that might have foreign malign influence and utilize all of those powers and authority under the Patriot Act to get those rubber stamp approval processes. And now you're talking about like you're okay with these amorphous kind of gray lines that we show over and over again. Like everything that you've stated would apply to every communist on Twitter. It would apply to Hassan, and then you have to be like, well,
it doesn't, because they're not, because like you said, you and I almost agree on this. I think I just have a slightly lower threshold than you do. You said that it has to be.
So what is that?
That's what I was trying to get at. So you said it has to be a clear communication of joining a group that we know is an issue.
Mhm.
But if we have like, I don't know, 50 people, I don't know what the correct number is. This is me spitballing right now for this debate, right? Say we have a person that hangs out with 50 people and like 3 of them are like, actively engaged in a foreign influence campaign that we know about. Well, that person, that group of 50 people that all hang out together, and those 3 people there, maybe look into those people a little bit more, just a little bit. Not necessarily like fucking going to getting a warrant to invade everything.
I respect your inability, and this isn't like because you're like incapable, but because of like a lack of imagination or anything. It's just I understand that you're like some number. Like I respect that your line is there needs to be some number of people that are problematic in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
The problem that I have with that, right, is that when I say we need a clear-cut thing, we need a clear-cut thing. And so like you
that's where
palling
judges come
around,
in.
like, so for example, what you just said would apply to Barack Obama. Barack Obama needs to be thoroughly
It
investigated
would have been.
because he's hung out with Weather Underground people, right?
Sure.
These are actual terrorist
Well,
people. He's considered
whether-
them mentors.
Rather underground, but
Right,
those
like-
people were like basically reformed at that
He was,
point that he was
it
hanging
doesn't
out with
matter.
them.
He was still a member.
Yeah, the
He was
people that had
direct-
previously
No. This
bombed
is
buildings, but they were reformed.
previously reformed. That's a distinction.
this is
I
what
think
I'm talking about.
matters.
Right, but exactly. That's
Why
what I'm
wouldn't
talking
that
about. It's like,
matter?
this is what I'm talking about. Is that I'm actually arguing that those things do matter. That there is
No,
nuance to
okay.
these things, and that's why
Yeah.
you have to have extremely clear-cut shit. Because when you
Well,
don't,
when-
and you
okay,
say,
actively-
well, 3 people with like terrorist kind of ties, I can go, well, that applies to the fucking former president. That's the problem.
I didn't
You're
say ties.
illustrating
I said
the problem.
actively engaged. I said actively engaged in things that we deem to be
Okay.
as in the people in this panel deem
$5
to not be good.
$5 from Testicle Johnson to say the
Well, then that would be a
USA Freedom
communication.
Act allows for monitoring internet traffic and search history by the government without a warrant right now, today. $5 additional from Testicle Johnson to say FISA 702 was used 200,000 times involving U.S. citizens in 2022, despite explicitly stating it is prohibited from doing so. And $2 from Testicle Johnson to say Fabio L. So,
based testicle Johnson.
Based.
look, they
Hashtag
gave me,
not an argument.
They
I don't
give
know.
me $2. I'll repeat it every day. But no, I understand the your concern for like a very strict line. I don't disagree actually. I think I hate to say it, but I'm kind of with you on this one. My concern though, what I am curious about is lower level investigations. So I'm not talking about like getting a wiretapping you, right? I'm not talking about that.
Mhm.
But should you be a person of interest, right, to the DHS if all your friends have ties to Hamas? I think there might be something there. Like if all your buddies have ties to Hamas, maybe they should at least pay more attention to you. Not talking wiretap.
No,
I'm not talking
we
invading
all
your
agreed on that.
privacy, but you should
We all agreed on
probably-
that because
yeah.
we
Yeah,
all agreed that
everybody
when we were
did.
talking about going through their Twitter, right? Like it's like yeah, if you're hanging around a bunch of terrorists, but
Okay.
like then like yeah, we should be going through your Twitter. We should be
What-
looking to see if there is publicly available information that proves that you're actually joining these people or something.
What
right?
about
Like, 'cause
infiltrating?
if I go
the
through your
groups?
Twitter,
Like undercover investigations?
Yes, undercover
Okay.
investigations undercover investigations do not require a warrant.
So
here's
I
my
actually have
yeah, these are
kind of a
problematic.
weird part on this is because of things like the Governor
True.
Whitmer thing, where you have actions of entrapment going on.
Yeah, that
There-
was not proven though.
Okay,
You go
we
ahead
can-
and say
we
your
can-
piece,
I
but
don't
don't-
want to.
that's
I
a
don't want to
whole other
relitigate that
debate.
right now.
That's why
But to
I'm
the
saying it so it
general
doesn't go
point, I
on
want to hear
one
Aircraft
side.
Sparky's thoughts on this.
So
General
but when
point:
it comes-
you have
Common, even
Yeah.
if it's not that case. Like
you have
Yeah.
you have a group that again has come to the attention of federal authorities that hey, a lot of these people have ties. We don't have warrants or wiretaps or anything on this, but maybe we should send a guy in to kind of like become a part of it, kind of play along and see what happens. Is that wrong? What do you think?
there are times when undercover operations are warranted and good if they are managed properly. The problem that we have seen with some of these infiltration tactics that have been used is they have been used to gaslight, to escalate. They have not been in a de-escalation mission. They are there to actually encourage and entrap people into doing deeds to justify their operations.
I mean,
I
that
think you're
has
maybe a little
happened.
heavy-handed with that. Like it has happened, but
It
what I would
has
say is
happened,
what I
but
would
it's
say is
like it can be thrown out in court.
what I would
It's
say is
rarely
what I would
done
say
that
that's a more accurate way of describing this, maybe, right, is that it's a corrupt incentive structure. And the corrupt incentive structure exists because when you have a government agency that isn't a part of the market or anything, right? They have to, and they're trying to justify their budget. What they constantly need in competition with the other budgets, right, is not they're not there to provide safety. That's not how they're measured. There's no measurement of no terrorist attacks happened in Florida and you were in charge of Florida, therefore you did a good job, right? What the way that the success is measured is how big of a guy did you take down? What was the crime that you stopped from a placing, right? And so what ends up happening in this corrupt incentive structure is that they're looking for a bigger fish constantly, and they're willing to engage in enabling the behavior, and they're willing to let the behavior continue for longer than it should in an attempt to get a bigger fish, or to justify bigger budgets and things. And so I don't know that it's so nefarious as like they're trying to create terrorists, though they do that sometimes. Like they have done that with like homeless, mentally ill people that were like, given near life in prison, and their terrorist attack was a fucking fertilizer bomb on horseback. Like like they have done that before, but for the most part, it's a corrupt incentive structure. And so I'm perfectly fine with getting a warrant to infiltrate a group so that you can get enough evidence on all of the people. But the moment that you start but the problem with that is the moment that you're in there, you have to be one of them. And so you have to engage in some level of illegality, or at least presumed illegality, in order to not break your cover. And the problem is that has never been managed properly, because what we have done is we have gone from allowing someone to be just enough of a participant to blend in, to allowing them to gas up, fund, and do all kinds of things to make the situation worse. And sometimes it blows up in their face. And that corrupt incentive structure is a real big problem that, like, until dealt with, undercover investigations on terrorist organizations need to be reined in severely.
Okay, Hammer, you were trying to get in there. I saw your hand.
Sure,
Go ahead.
I have a question, and this is what seems to be happening. So say like say you're like the DHS, okay? And on campuses, the Jewish population, like the Jewish students, seem to be coming out and saying that we don't feel safe. We feel like there's a lot of hate groups. We feel like there's a lot of antagonism. There are these protest groups that are pro-Hamas, and it's making us feel unsafe. And we think that they're up to something. And then again, you're the DHS, you're just hearing this, right? You haven't done an investigation. And then obviously on the Hamas side, they're saying, oh, we're not up to anything. We're just protest groups, whatever. Like, what at that point, what do you do?
So again, I think, as I stated before, right, campuses are some of the safest places in America in terms of crime rates. If you look at any of the crime statistics, lowest amounts of hate crimes, lowest amounts of crimes, lowest amounts of sexual assault and rape. There's this like myth that was perpetuated for a while that like rape was like rampant on campuses, but it was like way worse in the inner city or in dark, high crime areas in general. So what I would say is that, like, I understand that people's fears can be valid, right? And I don't think it even needs to be. I don't even think it needs to actually be a terrorist attack or anything to be a Jewish person trying to go walk to class and walk by a group of people saying globalize the Intifada, which at what was it, Stanford, I believe? I could be wrong. It might be a different Ivy League, right? Where you were hearing someone basically say kill all the Jews in the world is being chanted as you're trying to make it to class. Like, I understand that's fucking terrifying. And I understand that they feel unsafe. What I would say is, for the most part, that is a job of campus police and campus security. I think colleges get paid inordinate sums of money on bloated administration fees that they ought be using maybe during these unprecedented times to protect their students a little bit better. And I would also say that yes, I do think DHS has. I don't really think DHS should be the one involved here. As I said before, I think probably FBI. But if so long as DHS is going to be the one tasked with this, I do think that
Mhm.
they should be investigating potential threats. I do think they should investigate to a certain extent, but this need for like this deep tie with local law enforcement and this bloat in areas that are again, statistically speaking, the safest areas is really just them trying to bloat their budget and them trying to write reports to justify their positions
So
instead of doing things that are actually helping with our tax
I'm
dollars.
not
I've r-
totally familiar with college campus police force funding and their level of uh, ability to operate. But I don't know. To me, it seems like that if
They have
you
more rights. They're kind of like game wardens. They
sure,
have more
but
rights.
do they have the ability to successfully investigate and draw those? I don't think they have access to the resources they would need in order
Oh
to
no,
properly
no,
investigate
no.
certain of
Depends
these.
No,
on
no,
the,
no,
They
no, no,
depends on
no.
don't,
the
but
university.
hol-
To be fair,
hol-
depends on the university. Where I went
True.
to OU,
yeah.
our campus police at OU had more resources than the Oklahoma State troopers
But
did.
the issue Fabian brought up perverse incentives when it comes to police, campus police themselves. There's a lot of perverse incentives there because they're paid
Yeah.
for by the college, and when they're tasked with investigating things they have in the past. I don't know so much anymore. It's been a few years since I looked into this.
Uh-oh. Gang, am I still here? Hello? Everyone went dead. Can you guys hear me? Do you see everyone else? So you see me, but everyone else is frozen. Yes? Oh no. Gang. What is going on? I've never seen that before either. Everyone else froze, but you can hear me. I can hear me. I'm doing fine. What is going on here? Let me try. I'm going to try rejoining. Give me a second. Oh no. Oh no, gang.
Sorry, I was just bringing it up for the perverse.
Oh shit. Okay, you
incentives.
guys are all
Sure.
back.
We've
You
lost.
hold on. I missed the
you got
last
lost.
2
You got
minutes of
lost.
every single thing that happened.
Oh,
It's
Okay.
fine. We're just talking about police campus officers, so it
Yeah.
doesn't.
yeah.
Okay.
Unless
Yeah.
you want to relitigate that, it's
No,
Yeah,
we're fine.
But,
Okay,
but
sorry about that.
seriously,
Gang.
the way these
Wait,
projects are
I've
funded are through the endowments of these different universities. So the
You're right.
University
Okay,
of
hold
Memphis
on, hold
is
on.
going to be paid differently
hold
than
on.
the University of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
or whatnot.
Okay,
Can I just-
it's what's important to state. What I was trying to say about the local authorities, right, is that yes, if it is DHS. So far as DHS is the one tasked with this, it's DHS's job to investigate actual credible terrorist potential threats, right? It's DHS's job, not local, not like I'm near VCU Richmond, right? I'm a little ways away, but let's just use them as an example, right? They're in the city of Richmond. So Richmond PD and VCU police are kind of work both in that jurisdiction, right? It's neither of their job really, not really, to like investigate foreign malign influence and like some terrorist cell that might put a pipe bomb in a building or something, right? That's DHS's job, right? And they need to be tracking foreign terrorist funds through bank account ledgers and things like that. They need to be tracking money from these organizations. And then when that money ends up going to a activist group or something, then yeah, they might look at the activist group and see if they have anything publicly available that like warrants further investigation, something that actually gives them ability to have a warrant. And yes, it's okay I don't have a serious problem with them going, hey, this protest group, we don't have any direct evidence whatsoever of them doing anything, but we know they're getting a bunch of terrorist money. Like, do you have any information? And they're like, hey, we have information. And that is what is being asked for, because that's kind of what already exists, but there's some level of intercommunication that is the job of DHS. That was why the entire reason DHS was originally constructed was because 9/11 occurred and the CIA, if all of the information that existed between the FBI, the NSA, and the CIA, we could have stopped 9/11. Like if you'd have put all that information together, we absolutely would have known that 9/11 was coming. And because they weren't communicating, at least this is the government's story. We'll just leave it at that. Because they weren't communicating, there wasn't that. So this gives a justification for the DHS to be this kind of like pseudo federal agency, but also a communication agency. The DHS is mostly about facilitating communication and resources between different policing authorities. It's their job, for example, when the FBI says, hey, there's like Moms Against Liberty is dangerous because dads are screaming about the trans at school boards. And then DHS is the one that's like, all right, well, we'll look at these people and put them on a list. We don't want that, but that's what they do.
If you've been in the military intelligence community at all, they're basically 35 Foxes. They're an all-source wing and a fusion center for all information police officers on the federal level. So they have stuff for the military, stuff for the CIA, NSA, ODNI, etc. That's what they do. They synthesize information, help facilitate communication, like Fabian was saying, and create reports. That's their primary job.
They compartmentalize themselves to where they don't talk to each other. That's why we have so much bloat in the government to have what
they are talking to each other. That's the whole point. That's the whole reason why DHS was created.
That's why there's 17 different intelligence agencies.
There's 17 quote unquote different intelligence agencies because they do different things and are tasked for doing different things and have different expertise.
Yeah,
you don't have the same.
Don't get me wrong.
The same intelligence wing on a Navy aircraft carrier that you do in Bagram Air Force Base with the U.S. Army and Air Force. You don't have the same.
I mean, DHS. I think DHS is a symptom of a disease, as far as I'm concerned, which is a growing intelligence apparatus that all of a sudden needed someone to help all of these growing intelligence apparatus.
I mean, there was also
issues with that we shouldn't be doing, but
there was also issues with laws saying that they couldn't communicate, or at least if there wasn't a law, there was a practice of saying they couldn't communicate. So whenever the CIA got information, they didn't feel comfortable sharing it with the FBI, because then that could be considered a police action by the CIA within the United States, which could run afoul of the Constitution and of the, or not the Constitution, but of the church agreement, whatever, commission.
Yeah.
From the 70s.
Yeah. Well, you have you have an FBI agency that's basically their job is to communicate with the CIA. It doesn't do as much anymore, but because DHS exists. But but again, like, so I think that there's something to that. My issue is, obviously, again, I have to remind everybody, because I don't want people clipping this, but they will, but whatever. Obviously I'm doing an internal critique from your guys' perspective for the sake of the conversation. I am an anarchist. I don't think any of these fuckers should exist, but insofar that they do exist, right? There is a very concerning and legitimate fear about the tendency of state agencies to become more and more enmeshed. Even if you believe that those incentive structures are not nefarious, there is still an understanding that the more they constantly demand to have more liaisons, more contacts, all of a sudden those people, once they're there, they're very hard, they become entrenched, because nobody wants to lose their job. Everyone is constantly trying to justify their job. And unlike private companies, you don't just fire people because they're not making you enough money. In government, you just kind of keep them around. And so what ends up happening is this incestuous relationship and this financial bloat. You end up with a ever more expensive intelligence apparatus that is unnecessary. You end up with college campuses that are more expensive, that is unnecessary. And then you end up with all of these people with nothing to do but like try and watch and follow people. And you end up with like a Five Eyes expansion here in the United States, where we're just constantly being watched for no reason, and I think there's a lot of potential problems that come from that as well.
Yeah, just as far as like the incentive structure is concerned, I think this is a problem in general with how humans operate when it comes to security. I don't think this is a particular government issue, and the reason I say that,
I agree.
So the reason I say that, though, like you said, hey, you can't just fire somebody if it's in the government. There's a process, right? So there's incentives there to keep growing and justifying your budget. That's true even in the private sector, especially in the private security sector. So there's been issues with private security agencies justifying their budgets by justifying their continued existence among the corporations and NGOs and stuff like that by saying, oh, we stopped this attack, and attack wasn't actually a thing. You can take it all the way back to the Pinkers, where they infiltrated
we can point out
skulls. So
well, we can also point out when having that discussion, recognizing that like the private security industry isn't all that private, right? We're talking about we're talking about like,
that's why I brought it. That's
you know
why
what I mean?
brought it all the way
Like
to
they're
the
very
That's why I brought it all the.
enmeshed. Yeah.
That's why I brought it all the way to back to the Pinkers, the Pinkertons, Pinkerton
The
department,
Pinkertons.
that
Who still
existed.
exists, by the way, which is wild.
Yeah, they still exist. Which is, I mean, they're great at private investigations. That's their bread and butter. But they did justify their existence with private groups by saying, "Hey, there's this group that's trying to unionize here. Let's go bust some skulls. Let us do it." And they were doing the same thing. They were infiltrating the groups, putting them up to like unionize, so that they could justify their existence to the corporation that they were in, and then decided to go and bust skulls. Like that's what they were paid to do. Like it's just one of those situations that's just how people are. And to change that requires a different thing.
There's a difference there, right? There's a very, very substantive difference. I do agree that the Pinkertons were engaged in kind of creating, especially in Colorado, they were engaged in kind of like blowing up and gaslighting the concept of like potential unions so that they could engage with local law enforcement, by the way. So we can talk about it being private, but they were also with the cops, and busing up and, you know, potentially murdering quite a few women and children, specific, in a few of those instances, you know, when the labor fights were going on. But what I'm specifically talking about, right, is the inability to get rid of them, right? So like, as Milton Friedman said, there's nothing as permanent as a temporary government solution, right? There may be instances where people fearmonger and use that fearmongering and as in a fraudulent way, and against people's fears as a means of gaining power, gaining money to justify security actions that don't need to be done. But what I'm saying is if they get entrenched with local law enforcement because of this Israeli-Palestine conflict, right? Eventually this conflict dies down in some way, shape, or form or another. I'm not saying it does, but I'm just saying let's say it does for the sense of the hypothetical, right? Let's say fucking utopia land exists in 10 years and a two-state solution, the PLO actually fucking come to the table, and like the right-wing fucking Israelis actually fucking come to the table, and nobody decides to snipe a child or like throw a rock at somebody during a protest. So they actually get a two-state solution, right? Those people that were given there because of like the protests, most of them are never going to not have that job. That job they're not going to be like, oh, well, now that that's no longer an issue in campuses, we don't need this extra level communication. We're going to do some slash and cut the budget and make sure that we get, pull DHS out of the schools. And no, they stay there. They stay entrenched until the next emergency. And then we have to add more people.
The reason I said that the incentive structure is similar is because they would justify their budgets to anybody that was paying them, and then because they're the experts when it comes to security, it was likely that they would kowtow to it because they're like, well, you know about more security, you know about this information better than we do, so we're going to end up doing it. I think that this is just an issue that needs a different sort of incentive structure that can be created, whether it's government, private individuals, or something.
I think that you're showing that the private market does that to the same extent of the state. I agree that I already said that. I said I agree to the concept.
I don't think
that the market. I don't think
it matters. I don't think the only reason that the government has it more is because the government's the one that is primarily providing this kind of
no, it's not. No, the incentive structure is wildly different because yes, you can bullshit people when you're paid security for a while, but eventually if your bullshitting becomes too expensive, then you will get cut simply because you cost too much, because your competitor isn't doing that. But when you're talking about a state apparatus, if someone is in a job that doesn't need to be done, all they need to do is write a letter every now and then about some bullshit thing, which is what this is, by the way. The whole debate is this letter of bullshit that doesn't need to be done, where they're just trying to justify their position and their budget. And what ends up happening is because the taxpayers pay it, and because it's separated by multiple levels of bureaucracy, nobody really votes on these issues. And so there's no incentive structure to get rid of them. There's no price mechanism. That doesn't exist in the market.
Yeah,
it does exist.
I understand what you're saying. I just don't really agree with you. So it's fine.
I'm glad
it's a difference in philosophy.
Okay.
Don't need to argue that.
Gang.
All right. Well, you don't have an argument, Roger.
Fair enough. Let's talk about, and we are winding down. This is kind of, we're beginning to circle a little bit. Let me just ask, right? Like, is there a credible threat? Regardless of what you think should be done about it. Do we think that there is a credible threat of individuals in foreign countries, so whether it be China, Qatar, Iran, what have you, Are they trying to infiltrate groups on college campuses? Do we think
Yes.
this is a credible threat? Why or why?
I think probably yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Especially with like social media. I mean, like every group has access to like everybody's social media feed. Like Hamas is like popping off on TikTok, right? Like it's very easy for anyone to like basically
That's how
get
we had to get
access
rid of
to
it, right?
It's what
Eh,
we don't have to get into that. But like yeah, I mean basically yeah, every group has like access to like basically give propaganda to whoever they want, and college campuses, I mean, they seem to be tuned in to these conflicts, so it's political capital to be gained, right?
So the primary thing that that DHS is concerned about, as well as as well as NGOs that are looking at this from a security perspective, is not necessarily trying to infiltrate the groups themselves within college campuses. They're not trying to necessarily wiggle their way into the student union and stuff like that. It's more along the lines of funding and giving college campuses themselves money, because it is an institution that has to get private funding sources in order to stay in existence, and to use that in order to build up influence and change curriculum, things like that. Do we have evidence that that has actually happened? Not that I'm aware of, but we do have evidence that Qatar has donated I think it was $200 billion since 2000 or so. We have information that China has started trying to get people into tenure tracks in universities and fund certain
That's been
kind
happening
of
for a while.
departments.
That's different though.
we-
That's IP. Like China's less.
No.
China's less concerned.
No, they.
Well, I was just saying.
No. You're right. But in 2000, though,
Yeah.
it wasn't just IP. It was also trying to influence how.
No, I agree. I
China.
just mean if people, if I absolutely agree. I'm just saying most of the money, if you look up the numbers, right? Most of that money is just trying to have, for lack of a better term, Chinese spies in American universities to take intellectual property, and then.
Oh yeah, that's I'm talking about something different, but yes, you're right. That a lot of them.
Yeah.
My question then, since we all seem to agree that there is a credible threat here, what is to be done about it, if anything? What should either A, individuals do, B, private institutions such as universities do, or C, the government do in order to combat this, if anything? What are our thoughts? And we'll kind of end on this.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to say that the U.S. should disallow all foreign ownership of land in America to begin with. If they don't have a footprint here whatsoever, it gives them less chance to influence. And any foreign investment into political institutions should automatically be barred altogether, including PACs. I'm sick and tired of foreign money being in our politics, because that is a true way how you infiltrate a country and destroy it. And when it comes down to what should the people do, well, it's simple. The universities, which are mostly state funded, they're mostly public universities that we have in America. We have few private, but all these universities, they need to actually hold up to their code of conduct, regardless of what side the activist is on. They enforce that code of conduct. There has been disproportionate actions by administrations at these universities for enforcement of rules based on their own code of conduct, and they need to be held accountable to that. Because as long as they allow the populace of that university, but young kids are trying to be a part of something bigger than what they are, they're trying to learn how to engage in some form of activism to make themselves feel better for where they are and what they're doing. Don't punish the kids, but teach them all sides of these deals through actual classes that it would be legitimate in, like the history classes and things like that. Don't have someone going to human interaction 101 and have a 3-hour lecture on the tragedy that's going on in Gaza right now. I mean, it's not related to that subject. Yeah.
Any
Then-
other?
But then how would you
Um,
do your Farrian education?
I know. right?
I would actually say that they should probably keep a light hand. And I think that like when it comes to like social media, it's so sketchy. I actually don't agree with them banning TikTok. And I think that like any effort for them to like curtail the people finding misinformation on social media. Like the government trying to do that, it's a little bit sloppy and it's not effectual, and people really don't listen to government officials. So they really can't fix students coming across like naturally misinformation. All they can do is investigate to see if any like groups are directly communicating with members of Hamas or any other like enemy group, and like also making sure people don't commit hate crimes. And besides that, I think there's really nothing to be done. They just have to like let it run its course.
Just let it happen. Okay.
In terms
Got you.
of the misinformation part, yes.
Fair enough. Okay, gang. This has been. Oh, if you had something to say,
Oh.
Cypher.
I thought
Oh,
we
we're
were
doing
all
outros,
going to give our
my bad.
opinions.
Oh yeah, well,
yeah.
I was going to get to the official outros as we go.
So are we not all going? Does
No.
anybody else want to go before she and I can just say my piece?
Well, we're gonna do outros. Yeah.
Well, if we're just gonna
Oh,
do
that's fine, don't worry about
outros
it.
now, anyways,
Yeah,
it's
it's fine.
fine.
Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Okay. Gang, it's been great. It's been an interesting discussion. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to all the people who donated today. Really appreciate you, gang. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you want me to do more content like this, right? You got to support the channel, okay? If you want different kinds of content, right? Support me there. But the way I know what you want me to do is by you supporting me, right? So hit that like button, hit that follow button, subscribing, gifting subs, all that. It's all helpful. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, our normal time, we're going to have Adam Mockler, I'm Really Important, Counterpoints, and Principles Before Politics. And we're going to be sitting down, we're going to be discussing how to change minds, how to persuade, the art of persuasion, right? How do we reach out to people who are maybe differing from us ideologically, differing from us politically? How do we get them on board, right? It should be an interesting discussion. Tune in tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. But I want to give each of these individuals an outro. I want them to tell you where they can find you, and then I want you to go and find them and subscribe to them or follow them or whatever you need. We're going to start in the reverse order we started. We're going to start with Hammer, and we're going to go around. We're going to give Cypher last word. Hammer, go ahead.
Sure. I guess my last word is I don't think that the DHS is up to anything pernicious. I think I think we can clearly see what they're doing. Maybe I might agree with this. Maybe it's a little bit bloated and a little bit inefficient, but I don't think they're like part of some big conspiracy or anything. So I really wouldn't worry about anything that's going on here. My channel is m_r_hammer at twitch.com or twitch.tv. Sorry. I mostly just do games and politics and stuff, hang out.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you. Next up, Fabian Liberty. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Fabian Liberty. I'm an anarcho-capitalist, bordertarian, which apparently makes me different than most of them. And I bring that up now. Check me out, Fabian Liberty, everywhere. I'm on YouTube for the most part right now, but you can find me other places. Check me out on Twitter, I guess, for however long that account lasts. I just want to say about this. Listen, mostly this document is a nothing burger in the sense that anyone that has ever worked for a state agency knows that most of these documents are just fluff, begging for the government to give them more money, give them more power, because that's what these agencies do. That's how they get promotions. That's how they get awards. That's how they go from a GS-12 to a GS-13 is by, getting a big budget. And so it's a corrupt incentive structure. And that's kind of how the state works. And I think that's really what this document really shows in earnest, is the way in which, when we look at things like the Aspen Institute, when we look at CISA infiltrating Twitter and the Twitter files, when we look at all of the censorship that has occurred in so many different things, it's not about, this nefarious plot. It's about a bunch of well-meaning people working in NGOs and the government, trying to stop things that they think are bad, but it's a corrupt incentive structure that's not tied to the market. It's not tied to the actual purchasers and buyers that exist in the market, but instead it's tied to your tax dollars. And when it's tied to your tax dollars, it means money's stolen from what you can do with your money, what you know is best for you and your family. It's this theft that makes going to McDonald's a fucking $4 hash brown. That's the result of shit like this. It doesn't seem like it when you first look at it, but when you waste money on programs that don't work, that don't need to be done constantly, and you steal it from us, and then we end up in massive amounts of debt, and then you have to do things that end up inflating the currency, this is what we get. I will say, lastly, recommendation number 8 absolutely is good. Like DHS is the very last thing that they bury at the very bottom of the entire document, is the only thing in here that absolutely should be done, which is giving temporary protected status to Palestinians that are studying abroad, to where they don't have to go back to fucking Gaza just because they happen to like finish their college degree and go get bombed by the IDF. Like, I think that's probably a good thing. And then DHS's recommendation there, like, hey man, this might cause less problems if people aren't terrified they're going to be sent back to a war zone, is like, I don't know, probably a good thing. Be careful what powers you give the government, because at best, it slows down progress. It destroys our ability to fight climate change. It destroys our ability to save lives and create innovation. And at worst, it will be used in nefarious ways to ruin your life.
Okay. Check him out, gang.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. Aircraft Sparky, go ahead.
Americraft Sparky, populist constitutionalist. Look, Ronald Reagan, I think, said it best, and I'm probably going to mince this up terribly, but one of your biggest fears in the world should be someone coming to you and saying, I'm from the government and you should trust me, I'm here to help. The government has done nothing absolutely right, ever. We can look throughout the history of it. It's nothing but failure. It's a fail cascade. I work within the bureaucracy myself. I see it on a daily. Giving DHS more money so they can track a bunch of well-wished kids who are just trying to be passionate about something, until they've actually done something to be investigated. I just don't see the point in it. Okay. Everyone was young at one time. Everyone had a passion about something. Yeah, people say dumb shit. It just is what it is. I agree with Fabian. The last deal that they suggest is actually a great idea. Giving protected status to Palestinians who are getting ready to graduate, not sending them back. That's a great idea. It really is. It could help build some stability and possible future leaders for that area and that community. I have no problem with little actions like that, but setting up an entire office within these universities so they can look over curriculum and everything and try to make sure that you're giving the government approved message is what I'm concerned with. The FBI, the IRS, many of these agencies started off as a temporary solution, and here they are over 100 years later, still in action. And that's the problem. Our government has gotten too bloated, and it's limiting our freedom. I find it interesting that someone who many on the left would claim, oh, well, you're against civil rights. I'm the one trying to defend civil rights here. I'm trying to defend the hippie protester at the college, where some of my more liberal friends here on the panel are kind of like, oh, no, they're a little sussy and we should watch them because they don't have an opinion that maybe I don't like, or maybe they do have an opinion, but I don't like the way they say it. You know, it's one of those things. More freedom is good. More freedom is always going to be better. Thank you, Wick, for having me. Enjoyed it tonight.
No, thank you. Check him out, gang. Really appreciate you. Last but certainly not least, Cypher. Go ahead.
Hey everybody, my name is Cypher. I do a weekly show on my YouTube channel under Cypher Reports. You can find it on YouTube. You can find me pretty much anywhere that there's a social media account. I'm there, at least engaging a little bit. So to go over kind of what we talked about today, as Fabian said, this really isn't a nefarious thing. It isn't really looking out to like necessarily create more bloat in the government per se. There is some earmarks in here for quick turnarounds. Recommendation on 5 directly earmark congressional funds for emergency grant funding to specifically aid campus with quick turnaround financial support to meet safety and related needs during this Middle East crisis. In other words, that particular one there is talking about, hey, there's this immediate need, get them some funds so that they can help with the security needs. All that aside, the way that this was framed by But the intercept was bad. I think the more interesting thing to talk about with this in general is kind of how the DHS can monitor how foreign governments are trying to influence college campuses, whether it be through the infiltration in groups or faculty, or trying to get faculty and things changed under the guise of funding. So I think that's more important. But with that, I'm good.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
gang. It's been fun. It's been great. We will see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. We'll raid out. Wait, bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, bye-bye. Oh, my God. Takes so long. And we are